She said she was alone and pregnant, and then he spoke the words that would change 2 lives forever. Enough. From today on, you are my wife. It wasn't a marriage proposal. There was no knee on the ground, no gold ring. It was a firm, definitive declaration, the kind that admits no argument. A 41-year-old widowed farmer looking into the eyes of a 24-year-old housekeeper and deciding in that instant that she would not be left destitute. Can you imagine what goes through a woman's mind when in the moment of her life's greatest despair, when she expects to be thrown into the street like a used rag, a man decides to protect her, not with charity, but with his own name? But this story happened in rural Kentucky in March of 1928 on a farm called Hopewell, and what began as an act of generosity turned into something no one expected, not even them. Before we continue, write in the comments where you are watching from. Just typing the name of your city helps the channel grow immensely and brings more stories like this to you. And if you like stories of overcoming odds and true love, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Now come with me because this story is going to warm your heart. Arthur Vance woke up every day at 5 in the morning when the sky still held that leaden color that comes before the sun. He was a man of fixed routines, the kind who finds comfort in the predictability of days. He would rise, wash his face in a basin of cold water, put on his denim work pants and a raw cotton shirt, and pull on leather boots worn down by time. He would go down to the kitchen, where Mary, the cook who had worked with him for 15 years, already had fresh coffee brewed and biscuits with butter on the table. He ate breakfast alone, in silence, watching through the window as the mist covered the fields like a white sheet. Then he would go out for the first round of the day, checking the hands, the animals, the fences, the crops. He returned for lunch at noon. He rested for an hour on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. He went back to work until nightfall. He ate dinner, read a few pages of some book, and at 9 o'clock he turned off the lantern and went to sleep. Every day the same, an endless chain of mornings, afternoons, and nights that looked too much alike. He had lived this way for 5 years, ever since typhoid fever took Carolyn, his wife. She was only 32 when she died. 3 days of feverish delirium, and then, just like that, the house became empty in that way, where it seems even the walls miss the person. Arthur never entered their bedroom again. He moved into the study, sleeping on a narrow sofa, surrounded by accounting ledgers and farm papers. He left the master bedroom closed, the door locked, as if by preserving that space he could somehow keep her memory intact. The people in town talked, of course. They said he needed to move on, that a man still young couldn't live like an eternal widower, that the farm needed heirs. But Arthur didn't care what they said. He had the farm, he had the work, he had the days that repeated themselves, and that was enough. Or at least, he thought it was enough. Everything began to change 8 months before that March afternoon that would transform everything. It was July of 1927, a dry and cold winter in the countryside, when Mary entered the living room with a young woman behind her. Arthur was reviewing the harvest accounts, numbers that weren't adding up right because he had never been good with paperwork. He raised his eyes and saw a thin young woman wearing a simple but clean grey dress, brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, green eyes that looked straight ahead without fear, but also without boldness. She held a folded letter in her hands. Mary made the introductions. "This is Beatrice Miller, Mr. Arthur," said the cook with that motherly way she had. "She came from the city with a letter of recommendation. She's looking for work as a housekeeper." Arthur took the letter, read it in silence. The recommendation was from a well-known family in Louisville, praising the girl's efficiency, honesty, and discretion. It said she was leaving the job only because the family was moving to New York, and she preferred to stay in Kentucky. Everything very correct, very formal. He looked at Beatrice again. "How old are you?" he asked in a neutral voice. 24, sir," she replied in a firm but respectful voice. "I am an orphan," she continued. "I lost my parents when I was 14. Since then, I've worked in family homes. I know how to cook, clean, wash, iron, sew. I can read, write, and do sums. I don't cause trouble, and I don't ask for more than what's agreed upon." There was something in that objective introduction, without pleading or whining, that Arthur respected immediately. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was offering honest work in exchange for fair pay. He liked that. "All right," he said after a few seconds of silence. "You can start tomorrow. Mary will show you the room and explain the duties. Pay is at the end of the month, plus food and laundry." Beatrice nodded, and for the first time sketched something that almost looked like a smile. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret it." Then she left behind Mary, her light steps making almost no noise on the floorboards. Arthur went back to the numbers on the table, but realized he had lost his train of thought. He closed the ledger and went to the porch to smoke. The July sky was clear, that deep winter blue, and the cold cut against his face. He thought vaguely that it was good to have someone to help Mary, who was no longer young and complained of back pain. He also thought that the girl had nice eyes, clear green like river water, but he pushed the thought away as quickly as it came. He wasn't a man to notice such things. Not anymore. The first days with Beatrice in the house were of silent adaptation. She woke up before everyone else, Arthur discovered, because when he came down at 5 in the morning, she was already in the kitchen helping Mary with the coffee. She worked non-stop all day, always busy, always discreet. She didn't speak unless necessary, but when she did, it was to say something useful. After 2 weeks, the house had a different shine. The windows were cleaner, the bed linens smelled of lavender, even the forgotten corners had been scrubbed. Arthur noticed these things at a glance, but didn't comment. He wasn't a man for compliments. It was in the 3rd month, in October, that something small happened but left a mark. Arthur was in the study trying to organize the papers for the workers' payroll. He had piles of receipts, scattered notes, numbers he added 3 times and got different results for. He was starting to get irritated, rubbing his eyes with fatigue, when there was a knock at the door. It was Beatrice, bringing fresh coffee on a tray. She placed the cup on the table and then hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Forgive my boldness, Mr. Arthur," she said in a careful voice, "but I notice you spend hours with that paperwork. If you like, I can help. I know how to do sums and organize documents. I did that in the previous house. The master was a merchant." Arthur looked up at her, surprised. For an instant, he thought about refusing, the pride of a man who doesn't like to admit difficulty. But then he looked at the mess on the table, at the numbers that wouldn't balance, and thought it would be foolish to refuse help out of pure pride. "All right," he said finally. "You can try." Beatrice pulled up a chair, sat on the other side of the desk, and began separating the papers into organized piles. In less than an hour, she had everything classified by month, by type of expense, with partial totals noted on a separate sheet. Arthur watched in silence, impressed by her speed and efficiency. When she finished and showed the final result, he checked the numbers twice and discovered they finally made sense. "You're good at this," he commented, and it was the closest to a compliment he could manage. Beatrice smiled slightly. "I've always liked numbers," she replied. "They don't lie or change their minds. They're honest." Arthur nodded, and something in that simple phrase resonated with him in a strange way. "That's true," he agreed. "Numbers are honest." From that day on, Beatrice began helping him with the paperwork every week. They sat together in the study, her organizing receipts and doing sums, him reviewing and signing documents. At first, they worked in almost total silence, just objective questions and answers. But over time, small conversations began to emerge. Comments about the weather, the harvest, news from town. Arthur discovered that Beatrice read newspapers when she could, that she had formed opinions on politics and the economy, that she was more educated than most women he knew. She discovered that he liked history, that he had a collection of books about the Civil War and the Revolution, that sometimes he stayed up late reading about ancient battles and men dead for 100 years. The months passed. October turned to November. November turned to December. Christmas came and went, simple, without celebrations, just a supper prepared by Mary with Beatrice's help. Arthur ate in silence, thanked them for the food and retired early. But that night, lying on the narrow sofa in the study, he caught himself thinking that the house seemed less empty than in previous years. He couldn't identify exactly why, but the feeling was there, undefined, like a candle lit in a dark room. January of 1928 brought intense heat, that humid heat of the valley that sticks to the skin and makes everything slow. Beatrice continued working non-stop, but Arthur noticed she sometimes paused to wipe her forehead, that she climbed the stairs with more care, that she refused breakfast saying she wasn't hungry. He said nothing. He thought it was the heat affecting everyone. It was in February that something changed in their routine. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, market day in town. Arthur needed to buy new tools and some supplies. Usually, he went alone. But Mary had pain in her legs and asked Beatrice to go in her place to pick up some fabrics she had ordered. So the two went together, Arthur driving the wagon, Beatrice sitting beside him. The road to town took 40 minutes, and for the first time, they were alone outside the farm. At first the silence was comfortable, just the sound of the horses' hooves and the wheels on the beaten dirt. But then Beatrice started talking, pointing out things in the landscape, commenting on the crops they passed, asking questions about the history of the region. Arthur answered and realized he was enjoying that light conversation, without specific purpose, just two people sharing the road. In town they did their shopping separately, and then met at the square. Arthur had finished earlier and was waiting leaning against the wagon when he saw Beatrice coming out of the fabric store carrying a parcel. She was wearing a light blue dress he had never seen before. It must have been her good dress she saved for going out. The late afternoon sun hit her brown hair, and Arthur thought distractedly that she was pretty, really pretty, and then pushed the thought away with irritation. What difference did it make if she was pretty or not? On the way back, Beatrice was quieter, looking ahead with a distant expression. Arthur asked if everything was all right. She took a while to answer. "Yes, sir," she said finally. "Just tiredness." But there was something in her voice, a false note, that made Arthur frown. He didn't insist, however. He wasn't a man to force confidences. March arrived with heavy rains, those late winter storms that flood the roads and turn everything into mud. It was on one of these rainy afternoons, with a black sky and thunder tearing the air, that everything changed for good. Arthur was on the porch, checking if the gutters were handling the water, when he heard a scream coming from the kitchen. It was Mary's voice, shrill, calling for him in desperation. He ran inside, boots muddying the floor, and found Mary kneeling on the floor beside Beatrice, who was fallen, unconscious, her face pale as wax. "Wake up, child, wake up," Mary repeated, tapping lightly on Beatrice's face. Arthur knelt on the other side, took her wrist. It was weak, but regular. "Beatrice," he called with a firm voice. "Beatrice, open your eyes." After a few seconds that seemed eternal, her eyelids fluttered and opened. Her green eyes were confused, unfocused. "What happened?" Arthur asked. She tried to get up, but he held her shoulder firmly. "Stay still," he ordered. "Mary, get water." While Mary ran to get water, Arthur helped Beatrice sit, leaning against the wall. She was trembling, cold sweat on her forehead, even though the day wasn't hot. "I'm fine," she murmured. "It was just a dizzy spell." Arthur didn't believe it. "You're not fine," he said bluntly. "Has this happened before?" Beatrice looked away, and in that gesture he read the answer. Mary returned with the water, and Beatrice drank in small sips. Colour was slowly returning to her face. Arthur didn't take his eyes off her, his worry increasing. "Tomorrow morning I'm going to get Dr. Henry," he said, with a tone that admitted no discussion. "This isn't normal." "No need, Mr. Arthur," Beatrice protested with a weak voice. "It's just fatigue, it'll pass." He ignored her completely. "Tomorrow morning," he repeated firmly, and then helped Mary take Beatrice to her room. They put her in bed. Mary stayed with her while Arthur went back to the living room. He remained restless the rest of the afternoon, going up several times to check if she was all right, always finding Mary sitting by the bed like a guardian. The next morning, Sunday, Arthur got up even earlier than usual. He prepared the wagon and went to Dr. Henry's house in town. The doctor was a 55-year-old man, educated in New York, who had returned to the country to care for his sick mother and ended up staying. He was competent and discreet, two qualities Arthur valued. He explained the situation, and the doctor agreed to come to the farm immediately. They arrived before 9 in the morning. Beatrice was awake, sitting up in bed, her loose hair falling over her shoulders. She seemed surprised and embarrassed when she saw the doctor. "Mr. Arthur, there was no need," she started to say, but Arthur cut her off. "He's just going to examine you, and that's it," he said, leaving the room. He went down the stairs and stayed in the living room, pacing from one side to the other, lighting and putting out cigarettes. Dr. Henry stayed upstairs for almost half an hour. When he came down, his expression was serious. Arthur felt his stomach tighten. "Is it serious?" he asked. The doctor asked to sit. Arthur sat on the edge of the armchair, tense. Dr. Henry clasped his hands and took a deep breath before speaking. "Arthur, Beatrice is pregnant," he said directly, without beating around the bush. 4 months, by my calculation. The fainting was due to weakness and stress. She isn't eating properly, probably trying to hide the pregnancy." The world stopped. Arthur heard the words, but took a few seconds to process their meaning. Pregnant. 4 months. His housekeeper, the discreet and efficient girl who had been working in his house for 8 months, was 4 months pregnant. Which meant she was already pregnant when she arrived there, that she had hidden it all this time. Why? And whose was it? The doctor continued talking, something about necessary care and proper diet. But Arthur barely heard. His head was spinning, trying to understand. Then Dr. Henry asked a question that brought him back. "Do you want me to look for a place for her to go? A convent, perhaps? Or does she have family who can take her in?" Arthur looked up. "Let me talk to her first," he said, with a hoarse voice. The doctor nodded, left some instructions and medicines, and went away saying he would return the following week to check in. When the sound of the doctor's buggy faded in the distance, Arthur climbed the stairs slowly. He knocked on Beatrice's door. "Come in," came her voice, quiet, defeated. He opened the door. She was sitting in bed, her back against the headboard, hands in her lap. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Arthur pulled up the chair and sat in front of her. They remained in silence for a long time. Finally, it was he who spoke. "The doctor told me," he said. Beatrice nodded without looking at him. "I know." Arthur waited, giving her time to speak. When it became clear she wasn't going to say anything without being asked, he asked the direct question. "Whose is it?" Beatrice closed her eyes. "A man from Louisville," she replied in a low voice. "Richard Van Doren. I met him in the house where I worked. He was a lawyer for friends of my employers. He started courting me, said he would marry me. I believed him. I was an idiot, and believed him." She opened her eyes, and now the tears were there, running silently. "When I found out I was expecting and told him, he disappeared. Changed his address, didn't answer letters, vanished. My employers found out and fired me on the spot. I was on the street, without a reference, without anything. "And the letter of recommendation you showed me?" Arthur asked. Beatrice wiped the tears angrily. "I forged it," she admitted. "I knew how to write well. I knew the family's name. I knew you wouldn't check because it was too far away. I needed work. I needed to get out of the city before I started showing. I thought I could hide it until the end. Thought I would find a way when the time came. I know it was wrong. I know I lied to you, sir. But I had no choice." She looked at him for the first time, green eyes shining with desperation and fear. "I'm sorry. I'll leave today. You don't need to send me away. Just let me gather my things and I'll go." Arthur said nothing for a while. He processed everything he had heard. The lie, the desperation, the desperate courage of a girl alone in the world trying to survive. He thought of Caroline, the wife he lost, and how much she always said that judging is easy, having compassion is hard. He thought that if Caroline were alive, she would certainly help Beatrice. He also thought, surprising himself, that he didn't want Beatrice to leave. "Where will you go?" he asked finally. Beatrice looked away. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'll find a way. I always have." Arthur shook his head. 4 months pregnant, no references, no money. You won't last a week on the streets. And when the baby is born, what will you do? Beatrice didn't answer, because she had no answer. Arthur stood up, walked to the window, looked at the fields outside. He then made a decision that made no sense in his head, but made perfect sense in his chest. He turned to her. "You will stay here," he said. Beatrice looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "As a housekeeper until the baby is born, and then I arrange a place for you on another farm with the child." "No," Arthur said. And there was something different in his voice now, something decided. "You will stay here as my wife." The silence that fell in the room was absolute. Beatrice stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What?" she whispered. Arthur went back near the bed. "Listen," he said, and his voice was firm but also gentle. "You are alone and pregnant. I am a widower and alone. Society will destroy you and this child if you go on like this. But if you are my wife, the baby will have a name, protection, a future. You will have a home, food, respect." Beatrice shook her head, tears returning. "I can't accept that," she said. "It would be charity. It would be a burden on you, sir." "I don't want to be anyone's burden." "It's not charity," Arthur replied. "It's an agreement. You already work here, already help with everything. As a wife, it would be the same thing, only with legal protection. And it's not a burden because I'm offering it of my own free will." "But you don't even know me properly," Beatrice protested. "And what will people say? They'll think the baby is yours. They'll say you were forced." "Let people say what they want," Arthur said with a hard voice. "I don't live to please others. And as for knowing you, I know enough. I know you are hard-working, honest in your labor, intelligent, and had the courage to come out to the country alone, trying to rebuild your life. That's enough for me." Beatrice covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. "But what about you?" she whispered. "Won't you want to marry for real one day? Have children of your own?" Arthur felt a pang in his chest hearing that, memories of Caroline returning. "I was already married," he said quietly. "I already had my time for love. I don't intend to marry again for sentiment, but marrying for an agreement, to help someone that I can do." He knelt in front of her to be at eye level. "Beatrice, listen well to what I'm going to say. Enough. Enough of you being alone and helpless. Enough of being afraid of the future. From today on, you are my wife. Not on paper yet, but in decision. Tomorrow we go to the courthouse and register it. Later we'll do the ceremony in the church when you're better. And that's it. The suffering is over." Beatrice stared at him, green eyes swimming in tears, and Arthur saw something there he didn't expect. Hope. Hope mixed with disbelief, with fear of believing, but hope nonetheless. "Why are you doing this?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Why are you being so good to me after I lied?" Arthur thought about the question. There wasn't a simple answer. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be alone and feel like the world has ended," he said slowly. "Maybe because my wife would have done the same if she were alive. Or maybe because I got used to you being here, and I don't want you to leave." He gave a tired half-smile. "The why doesn't matter much. What matters is that it's the right thing to do." Beatrice broke down in sobs then, that crying of someone who has held on too tight for too long. Arthur didn't know quite what to do. He had never been good with crying, but instinctively he took her hand and squeezed it. "Easy," he said. "It'll work out, you'll see." And for the first time in 5 years of widowerhood, he felt he was doing something that had a purpose beyond survival. They talked a little more, settling practical details. They would marry at the civil registry in 3 days, enough time to sort out the paperwork. Beatrice would move to the master bedroom. Arthur would continue in the study. To the eyes of the world, they would be husband and wife, but between them it would be an agreement of mutual protection and respect. No demands, no expectations beyond civilized coexistence. When Arthur went down, Mary was in the kitchen pretending to be busy, but clearly waiting for news. He told her the decision. The cook stared at him for a long moment and then nodded. "You are a good man, Mr. Arthur," she said with an emotional voice. "Miss Caroline would be proud." Arthur didn't answer, just went out to the porch to smoke. His hands trembled slightly when he lit the cigarette. He had just completely changed his life, and another person's in a half-hour decision. It was madness. It was impulsive. It was completely out of character for him, but it felt right. The next 3 days were strange. Beatrice stayed in her room, resting as the doctor had ordered. Mary took care of her, bringing food and keeping her company. Arthur worked on the farm as always, but his mind was divided. He thought about what he had done, what he was about to do. He had moments of doubt, of course. He wondered if he wasn't being hasty, if he wouldn't regret it. But every time the doubt came, he thought of Beatrice alone on the street with her belly growing, and the doubt vanished. The night before the wedding, he finally unlocked the room that had belonged to the couple. The door creaked when he opened it, stuffy air escaping like a held breath. Everything was exactly as he had left it 5 years ago, covered in dust and forgetting. The double bed with the embroidered quilt Caroline had made, the dresser with the mirror, the rocking chair near the window where she liked to sit and sew, the wardrobe with her clothes still hanging. Arthur entered slowly, his chest tight. He'd avoided that room for 5 years because it hurt too much. But now, for the first time, the pain had an edge of peace. He sat on the bed, ran his hand over the dusty quilt. "Carol," he whispered to the empty room, "I'm going to marry again. It's not like it was with you. It never will be. But it's the right thing to do. I hope you understand." The silence brought no answer, but it brought no condemnation either. Arthur took a deep breath and left the room. He called Mary and asked her to clean everything, change the linens, air it out well. It was time to let the past rest. On Monday morning, Arthur and Beatrice went to town in the wagon. She wore a simple but pretty green dress, her hair pinned up with more care than usual. She was pale and nervous, hands clasped in her lap. Arthur was also tense, back too rigid, eyes fixed on the road. They didn't talk during the ride. What words existed for a moment like that? At the courthouse, the clerk was Mr. Oliver, a 60-year-old man who had known Arthur since he was a child. When they entered together, the man raised his eyebrows in surprise, but asked no questions. He processed the documents, read the terms of the civil marriage in a monotone voice, asked for signatures. Beatrice signed with a trembling hand. Arthur signed with a firm stroke. The clerk stamped it. "You are married by law," he said. "May God bless you." They left the courthouse as husband and wife. On the way back, Arthur felt he needed to say something. so he spoke, looking straight ahead. "I want you to know you can trust me. I won't ask anything of you other than respect, and I will protect you and the child with everything I have." Beatrice looked at him, eyes shining. "I know," she said softly. "And I promise I will be a real wife as much as possible. I'll take care of the house, help with what's needed. I'll make what you're doing for me worth it." "It's not about being worth it," Arthur replied. "And you can stop calling me sir. I'm your husband now. Call me Arthur." She hesitated and then nodded. "Arthur," she repeated, trying the name without the formality. "And you call me Beatrice, not Miss." He almost smiled. "All right, Beatrice." When they arrived at Hopewell Farm, Mary had prepared a special lunch, her way of celebrating. The three ate in the kitchen, talking little but with a lighter atmosphere. Afterward, Arthur showed Beatrice the master bedroom, now clean and ready. She stood in the doorway, clearly embarrassed. "This was yours and your late wife's room," she murmured. "It doesn't seem right to me." Arthur touched her shoulder lightly. "Caroline wouldn't mind," he said. "And I already told you I sleep in the study. This room is yours. You and the baby need a comfortable space." Beatrice entered slowly, looking around with wondering eyes. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen clearly. "Thank you," she whispered. Arthur nodded and left, letting her settle in. He went down to the study, the narrow space that was his bedroom now. He sat on the sofa, took off his boots, lay down looking at the ceiling. He was officially married again. He had a wife sleeping upstairs, a wife carrying another man's child, in a situation anyone would call madness. But strangely, Arthur felt good. He felt he had done something right, something that went beyond himself. And that was enough for now. The first days as husband and wife were a strange dance of careful approach. Beatrice woke up early, went down to the kitchen, helped Mary with the coffee. Arthur came down right after, had breakfast with them, went out to work. He returned for lunch, greeted with a nod, ate in silence. In the afternoon he worked more, returning at dusk. He had dinner, read a little, retired to the study. Beatrice stayed in her room, or helped Mary, or sat on the porch sewing. They were rarely alone, and when they were, they didn't quite know what to say to each other. It was like living with a polite stranger, someone who shared the house but not the life. The whole town knew about the wedding in less than a week, of course. The news spread like fire in dry grass. Arthur Vance, the reclusive widower, had suddenly married his housekeeper. No one had been invited, no one had seen an engagement, no one knew anything until the deed was done. Tongues wagged immediately. "How strange," they commented at the market. "A marriage like that, hidden, there's something to it." Mrs. Gable, the wife of the general store owner, was the most vocal. "I bet the girl was already pregnant," she said to her friends in the church choir. "That's why the rush. Shotgun wedding without the shotgun, everyone knows." The gossip reached Arthur through the farm foreman, an old man named Joseph who had worked with him for 20 years. He mentioned in passing that people were talking. Arthur just shrugged. "Let them talk," he said. "People's tongues don't pay my bills." But inside he felt a pang of anger. Not for himself, he was used to gossip, but for Beatrice. He knew she would suffer from the looks and whispers. It was on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the wedding, that Beatrice asked to go to town to buy sewing thread. Arthur said she could take the small buggy and go alone, but she hesitated. "It would be better if you went along," she said in a low voice. Arthur understood immediately. She was afraid to face people alone. "All right," he agreed. "We'll go together on Saturday." On Saturday morning they went to town. It was market day. The square was full, stalls of fruits and vegetables, people circulating, children running. When they got down from the wagon, Arthur noticed the looks. Women whispered amongst themselves. Men watched from the corner of their eyes. Beatrice stiffened beside him, her hand gripping her purse tightly. Arthur then did something he hadn't planned himself. He took Beatrice's hand and interlaced his fingers with hers. She looked at him surprised, but he just squeezed lightly and started walking. They went to the fabric store like that, hand in hand, for everyone to see. Inside the store, Mrs. Martha, the seamstress, greeted them with forced politeness. "Congratulations on the marriage, Mrs. Vance," she said with a voice that held no warmth. Beatrice thanked her quietly and asked for the threads she needed. While Mrs. Martha gathered the items, Mrs. Gable, the town's chief gossip, entered the store. She saw Beatrice and paused, eyes scanning her figure from top to bottom, clearly looking for signs of a belly. Beatrice lowered her eyes, cheeks flushing with shame. Arthur felt anger rise. "Mrs. Gable," he greeted with a hard voice. She turned to him and forced a smile. "Arthur, what a surprise, your marriage. So sudden." Arthur held her gaze without blinking. "When folks know what they want, they don't need to wait," he replied. She gave a forced little laugh. Of course. It's just that people talk. You know how it is. They find it strange for a housekeeper to become a wife just like that overnight." Arthur took a step toward her. "What people think or don't think isn't my business," he said with a low but cutting voice. "Beatrice is my wife. She has my name, my protection, and my respect. And I expect everyone in town to respect her too, because if I hear of anyone treating her poorly, that person will have a problem with me. Is that understood?" Mrs. Gable went pale. The other women in the store stopped pretending they weren't listening and looked directly. Beatrice was red, but now not from shame, it was from something different. Arthur paid for the purchases, took Beatrice's hand again, and they left the store with their heads held high. Only when they got into the wagon and left the square did he let go of her hand. "Thank you," Beatrice said quietly. Arthur shook his head. "No need to thank me. I'm your husband. It's my duty to defend you." But it wasn't duty that made him do that, and both knew it. It was something more, something neither of them was ready to name. That night, Arthur was in the study reading when there was a knock at the door. It was Beatrice, holding a cup of tea. "Brought this for you," she said. "Chamomile with fennel helps relax." He took the cup, surprised by the gesture. "Thank you." She stood there, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing how. Finally, she let it out. "What you did today in town, it was more than I deserved. You didn't need to defend me like that." Arthur took a sip of tea. "Yes, I did," he replied. "You are my wife. People need to know I don't accept disrespect." Beatrice bit her lip. "But I know this marriage isn't real in truth." "It's an agreement, you said so yourself, so you don't need to pretend there's something more." Arthur stared at her. "Who said I'm pretending?" Beatrice blinked, confused. "What?" He placed the cup on the table, ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Beatrice, this marriage started as an agreement, it's true, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. I do, and I don't like seeing anyone hurting you. That's not pretending." Beatrice stayed quiet for a moment, processing. Then she spoke, voice low. "I care about you too. More than I thought was possible in such a short time." Their eyes met, and something passed between them in that instant, something electric and scary and good at the same time. Arthur looked away first, heart beating faster. "Good night, Beatrice," he said. She understood the dismissal. "Good night, Arthur," she replied, and left, closing the door slowly. After that day, something subtly changed between them. They started talking more. Not just about practical things, but about everything. Beatrice told him about her childhood, the parents she lost early, the struggle to survive alone. Arthur told her about Caroline, about how they met, about the pain of losing her. They were conversations in pieces, crumbs of trust deposited one at a time, building something bigger. The afternoons doing accounts together became routine again. They sat in the study, her organizing papers, him reviewing. But now there was conversation in between, occasional laughter, accidental touches of hands that weren't so accidental. Once, Beatrice was reaching for a book on the high shelf and lost her balance. Arthur caught her by the waist, firmly, and for a second they stood like that, very close, breath mingling. "Sorry," he murmured, letting her go. Beatrice fixed her hair with trembling hands. "No need to apologize," she replied. April arrived, and with it, Beatrice's belly began to truly show. It couldn't be hidden anymore, even with loose dresses. She was 5 months along now, and the pregnancy was evident. Arthur noticed she started touching her belly more frequently, an unconscious and maternal gesture. One night they were having dinner when Beatrice made a face and brought her hand to her belly. Arthur stood up, alarmed. "What is it? Does it hurt?" She shook her head and then smiled, a genuine smile he rarely saw. "No, it moved. The baby moved for the first time." Arthur sat down again, something tightening in his chest. "Really? What's it like?" Beatrice thought. "It's strange but good, like a butterfly flapping wings inside." She looked at him. "Want to feel?" Arthur hesitated. Would it be too intimate? But curiosity and something stronger won out. "If you don't mind." Beatrice took his hand and placed it on her belly over the dress. They stayed like that for a few seconds, waiting. And then it came, a slight movement, like a tremor. Arthur widened his eyes. "I felt it," he whispered. "She's moving." Beatrice laughed softly. "Could be a he, too. We don't know yet." "True," Arthur agreed, but didn't pull his hand away. They stayed there, connected through that small life growing, and something solidified between them in that moment, something that went beyond agreements and papers. Weeks passed, and the routine deepened. Beatrice completely took over the administration of the house and the farm finances. Arthur discovered she had a real talent for it. The numbers finally made sense, accounts balanced, there was even money left over at the end of the month. She reorganized the pantry, renegotiated contracts with suppliers, found ways to save without losing quality. The farm was running better than it had in years. One afternoon in May, Arthur returned from the fields and found Beatrice on the porch talking to a gentleman he didn't know. The man was about 50, nice clothes, city air. When she saw Arthur, Beatrice tensed. "Arthur, this is Mr. Lawrence," she said with a strange voice. "He is a solicitor from Louisville. He came to bring some papers." Arthur greeted him with suspicion. "What papers?" The solicitor opened his briefcase. "It's about a property that belonged to the lady's parents," he explained, looking at Beatrice. "A small house on the outskirts of the capital. It was in probate for years, now finally released. The lady is the sole heir." Beatrice seemed surprised. "I didn't even know anything was left," she murmured. "The house was mortgaged," Mr. Lawrence continued. "But the debt was paid off recently, and now it's in the lady's name. You just need to sign here, transferring it to whoever you want, or you can keep it yourself." "Who paid off the debt?" Arthur asked, suspicion growing. The solicitor consulted the papers. "A certain Richard Van Doren, attorney, paid everything in cash last month and asked to locate the original owner of the property." Beatrice turned white. "Richard," she whispered. Arthur felt his stomach turn cold. "This Richard, is he known to my wife?" he asked the solicitor. The man shrugged. "I don't know, sir. I only know he paid and asked to find her. Left a contact address in case she wants to talk to him." Beatrice stood up, legs wobbly. "I don't want anything from him," she said with a trembling voice. "You can return the property, do whatever you want. I don't accept anything that comes from him." The solicitor seemed confused. "But, ma'am, it's a house. It's worth money." "You have the right." "I don't want it," Beatrice repeated louder. Arthur touched her arm. "Calm down," he said. Then he looked at the solicitor. "Leave the papers. We'll review them and send an answer later." The man nodded, left the documents, and went away. When they were alone, Beatrice collapsed into a chair, shaking. "It's him," she said. "Richard. He's looking for me. After months gone, now he shows up." "Why?" Arthur took the papers, read carefully. "Because he found out you married," he replied, "and found out you married someone with property. I bet he thinks he can take advantage of that somehow." Beatrice covered her face with her hands. "I don't want to see him, Arthur. I want nothing to do with him. He used me, threw me away, and now wants what? To pretend he cares?" Arthur knelt in front of her, took her hands and moved them away from her face. "Look at me," he asked. She opened her red eyes. "You won't see him if you don't want to," he promised. "I won't let anyone force you to do anything, and if he shows up here, he'll have to go through me first." "Leave it to me," he said softly. "I'll handle it." In the following days, Arthur made discreet inquiries. He talked to acquaintances who had contacts in the capital, sent letters to trusted lawyers. What he found out wasn't good. Richard Van Doren really was a lawyer, but had a terrible reputation. Compulsive gambler, owed money to dangerous people, had been expelled from 2 firms for dishonesty. The story of paying off Beatrice's house debt was a calculated move, clearly. He wanted to get close to her again, maybe for the child, maybe for Arthur's money, maybe for both. Arthur wrote a direct letter. He made it clear that Beatrice was legally his wife, that the child would have the Vance surname, and that any attempt at contact would be met with legal action. He sent the letter with the best lawyer he knew, an influential man who carried weight in the capital. He hoped that would be enough to keep Richard away. But it wasn't. 2 weeks later, on a hot afternoon in June, Arthur was on the porch when he saw an unknown man getting off a rented horse. He was handsome in a studied way, well-cut hair, city clothes, easy smile. "Good morning," he greeted, walking up the steps. "I'm looking for Mrs. Beatrice Van Doren." Arthur stood up slowly, blocking the entrance to the house. "Her name is Beatrice Vance," he corrected with a hard voice, "and you must be Richard." The man's smile faltered. "I am. I came to speak with her. It's important." "She doesn't want to speak with you," Arthur said, "and I already sent a letter making it clear that any contact would be a problem. So I suggest you get on that horse and go back to the city." Richard lost the veneer of politeness. "Look here, friend," he said with a harder voice. "That baby Beatrice is carrying is mine. I have rights." "You have no rights," Arthur replied. "You abandoned her when she needed you most. Disappeared like a coward. Now she is my wife, and the baby will have my name. You have nothing here." Richard took a step forward. "I can cause trouble," he threatened. "I can claim you took advantage of a vulnerable woman, forced a marriage. I can make a scandal in the courts." Arthur didn't back down an inch. "You can try," he said, "but I have better lawyers than you. I have a clean reputation, and I have witnesses that the marriage was legitimate. You have what? Gambling debts and a reputation for dishonesty. So go ahead. Make your scandal. Let's see who ends up badly." The 2 men stared at each other, electric tension in the air. That was when the house door opened and Beatrice came out. She had heard everything from inside. She was pale but firm. "Richard," she said, and her voice didn't shake, "you need to leave." Richard turned to her, and the fake smile returned. "B." He started using the intimate nickname that made Arthur clench his fists. "I know I ruined everything. I know I was a coward, but I want to fix it. I want to assume my responsibility. I want to be present for the child." "Where were you when I told you I was pregnant?" Beatrice asked with a cold voice. Richard lowered his eyes. "I panicked," he admitted. "I was wrong, I acknowledge that. But now I'm ready." Beatrice gave a humorless laugh. "Now you're ready, after you found out I married a prosperous farmer. How convenient." "It's not that," Richard protested. "B, I still have feelings for you. We can start over, can build a real family, you, me, and the baby." Beatrice went down the steps and stood beside Arthur. "I already have a family," she said. My husband, this house, and the baby who will be born with the Vance name. You are not part of this. You had your chance and threw it away. Richard looked from one to the other, anger replacing the pretense. You will regret this, he said. I won't give up like this. I'm going after my rights. Arthur took a step forward, threatening posture. If you step on this property again, I'll run you off with a shotgun. And if you try anything against my wife or my family, I will finish you. Understood? Richard stepped back, realizing he had lost. He mounted the horse and rode away, galloping, kicking up dust. When the sound of hooves faded, Arthur turned to Beatrice. Are you all right? She was trembling now, the adrenaline fading. I don't know, she admitted. Seeing him again was horrible. But it was also good to say all that, to say he has no place here. Arthur touched her face, a gesture that surprised both by the intimacy. You were very brave, he said. And I meant it. He won't get near you. Beatrice covered his hand with hers. I know. I trust you. And then, without thinking much, she did something she had been wanting to do for weeks. She stood on tiptoe and kissed the corner of his mouth. Quick, soft. Thank you, she whispered, and ran inside the house. Arthur stood on the porch, hand on the spot where she had kissed, heart racing. Something had definitely changed. The agreement had turned into something else, something real, something that scared and excited him at the same time. That night, neither of them could sleep properly. Arthur lay on the study sofa, thinking of the touch of her lips, the smell of lavender she wore, the way her green eyes shone when she called him husband for real for the first time. Beatrice lay in the master bedroom, hand on her belly, thinking about how her heart sped up every time Arthur entered the room, how she had started anxiously awaiting the afternoons doing accounts together, how his touch today had seemed different, charged with something more. The following days were of delicious tension, glances that lasted longer than necessary. Touches that multiplied, a hand on the shoulder, fingers meeting when passing the salt, a hug that lasted 2 seconds too long. Conversations that went late into the night, him going up to bring her tea, her coming down to get a book and staying in the study talking. It was a dance of approach, both afraid to take the next step, but also unable to retreat. It was on a Saturday night, late June, that everything changed for good. It had been a long and hot day, a storm threatening but not coming. Arthur showered and came down with damp hair, just in trousers and an open shirt. He passed through the living room to get water in the kitchen and saw light coming from the study. He found it strange because he had left everything off. He entered and found Beatrice there, sitting on his sofa, reading one of the history books. She looked up when he entered. Sorry, she said. I couldn't sleep. Came to borrow a book and ended up getting distracted. Can I stay? Arthur nodded. Of course, I can't sleep either. He sat beside her, leaving space between them. She showed the book. It's about the Civil War. You were right. It is fascinating. He smiled. Told you you'd like it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, her reading, him just sitting close. Then Beatrice closed the book and looked at him. Arthur, can I ask you something? He turned. You can. She hesitated. Do you regret it? The marriage? Bringing me into your life? It's been a lot of trouble because of me. Richard, the gossip, everything. Arthur held her gaze. I don't regret it for a second, he said firmly. You aren't trouble, Beatrice. You are the best thing that happened in this house in years. She blinked, surprised. Really? Really, he confirmed. This house was dead before you arrived. I was dead. Just existing, not living. You brought life back. And you, Beatrice said with a low voice, brought salvation for me. Not just the house and the name. You made me feel like I'm worth something again. That I'm not just a mistake, a burden. Her eyes filled with tears. You made me feel I deserve to be loved. You do deserve it, Arthur said, and his voice came out hoarse. Deserve everything good, and anyone who didn't see that is an idiot. Beatrice let out a wet laugh. Including you? Including me, he admitted. Because it took me a while to notice, but now I see. I see you, Beatrice, and what I see is incredible. She held her breath. What are you saying? Arthur took her hand, interlaced fingers. I'm saying this marriage started as an agreement, but it isn't anymore. At least not for me. I'm saying that when I wake up, the first thing I think is, if you slept well. That when I'm in the fields, I get anxious to return because you'll be here. That when you smile, the whole day gets better. He took a deep breath. I'm saying I fell in love with you, Beatrice. For real. The tears flowed freely now. Me too, she whispered. I tried not to fall in love because I was afraid. Afraid it was just gratitude. Afraid you would never feel the same. But it's not gratitude, it's love. I love you, Arthur. He pulled her close, and this time the kiss was real. Long, deep, full of weeks of restraint exploding at once. His hands on her face, in her hair. Her hands on his chest, feeling the racing heart. When they separated, both were breathless. Arthur rested his forehead on hers. I don't want to sleep in the study anymore, he confessed. I want to sleep with you. Wake up with you. Be a husband for real. She nodded against his forehead. I want that too. I want this marriage to be real in every sense. They went up together, hands interlaced, hearts synchronized. At the bedroom door, Arthur stopped. Are you sure? We don't need to rush. Beatrice pulled him inside. I'm sure, she said. For the first time in my life, I'm sure of something. And she closed the door, letting the rest of the night be just theirs. The next morning, Mary found the study empty and the master bedroom door closed. The old cook smiled to herself. Finally, she murmured. Finally, that house had returned to being a home. The following months were the happiest Arthur remembered living. Beatrice blossomed, not just in pregnancy, but in everything. She was more confident, smiling more herself. She completely took over the farm administration alongside him, and together they formed an unbeatable pair. Her with the intelligence for numbers and planning, him with the field experience and relationship with workers. The farm prospered like never before. The belly grew, and with it, the love between them. Arthur spent the evenings with his hand on her belly, talking to the baby. He told stories, sang off-key songs that made Beatrice laugh. He prepared the nursery personally, painted the walls a pale yellow, assembled the wooden crib he had made to order. Beatrice sewed little clothes, embroidered sheets, made tiny blankets. The whole house prepared for that new life. In August, Beatrice was 8 months along, and the doctor said the baby could arrive at any moment. Arthur stayed on constant alert, didn't stray far from the house, left instructions to be called from the fields if anything happened. Beatrice laughed at his worry, but secretly loved it. For the first time in her life, someone cared like this, genuinely, completely. It was on a September morning, the sun rising beautifully over the crops, that Beatrice woke Arthur with her hand gripping his arm. The contractions started, she whispered. Arthur jumped out of bed so fast he almost fell. I'm going to get the doctor, he said, already pulling on boots. Beatrice held his hand. Calm down, it's just starting. We have time. But he was already leaving, yelling for Mary to prepare hot water and towels. The labor lasted 12 hours. They were the 12 longest hours of Arthur's life. He paced from one side to the other in the living room, going up the stairs now and then to hear if everything was okay, being kicked out by the doctor every time. Mary stayed with Beatrice the whole time, holding her hand, wiping sweat, giving words of encouragement. When finally the baby's cry echoed through the house, Arthur felt his legs weaken. He ran up the stairs and found Dr. Henry coming out of the room wiping his hands. It's a girl, he announced, smiling. Strong and healthy. Mother is fine too. You can go in." Arthur entered slowly, almost afraid. Beatrice was in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle of white cloth. She looked at him and smiled. "Come meet our daughter," she said. He approached, looked down, and his heart melted completely. She was tiny, perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and squeezed shut eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered with a choked voice. Beatrice passed the baby to him. "Hold her." Arthur took her with extreme care, as if she were made of glass. The baby made a little noise and opened her eyes, looked straight at him. And in that moment, Arthur knew he was a father. Blood or biology didn't matter. That was his daughter, and he would love her until the end of his days. "What will the name be?" Mary asked from the door. Beatrice and Arthur looked at each other. They had talked about this in the last weeks. "Laura," Beatrice said. "Laura Caroline Vance." In the middle name in honor of Arthur's first wife, a gesture of respect and love he never asked for, but that touched him deeply. Arthur kissed Beatrice's forehead. "Perfect," he agreed. "Laura Caroline, welcome to the world, little one." The following days were of chaotic and wonderful adaptation. Nights without sleep, diapers changed 1,000 times, crying that seemed endless, but also first smiles, the little way of grabbing a finger, baby smell that was addictive. Arthur discovered he loved being a father, surprising himself. He woke up in the middle of the night to rock her when Beatrice was too exhausted, sang made-up songs, made funny faces to make Laura smile. The whole town came to visit, bringing gifts and blessings. Even Mrs. Gable appeared, offering disguised apologies for having been a gossip. Arthur accepted politely, but without warmth. Beatrice was kinder, offered coffee and cake, showed the baby. The women were enchanted with Laura, praised the room prepared with such care, commented on how pretty and happy Beatrice looked. The gossip changed tone. Now they said it had been a love match all along, that it was obvious by the way the two looked at each other. People have short memories when they want to. The following Sunday, they christened Laura in the town church. Father Simon, that wise and gentle man who had blessed the civil marriage, performed a beautiful ceremony. Beatrice cried with emotion. Arthur held her hand firmly. When the priest poured the holy water on Laura's little head and said she was a daughter of God and the Vance family, Arthur felt something complete inside him. Family. He had a family again. It wasn't a replacement for what he had lost. It was a new family, built on different foundations but equally strong. On the way back from church, they stopped at the farm and found an envelope nailed to the door. Arthur took it, recognized the postmark from Louisville, opened and read it. It was a letter from his lawyer. Richard Van Doren had given up any claim. More than that, he had left the capital, rumors said, fleeing gambling debts. He no longer represented a threat. Beatrice read over Arthur's shoulder and sighed in relief. "It's over then," she said. "That ghost is finally gone." Arthur crumpled the letter and threw it away. "It's over," he confirmed. "And now we just start the rest of our lives." They looked at Laura sleeping peacefully in Mary's arms, and then looked at each other. Beatrice stood on tiptoe and kissed him, long and sweet. "I love you," she whispered. Arthur hugged her, hugged their daughter, hugged the whole family. "I love you too," he replied. "You two are my life now." And they really were. In the months that followed, the farm transformed into a true home. Children's laughter filled the rooms. Plans were made for the future, expansion of production, improvements to the house. Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again, this time Arthur's biological child. The news filled them with joy. Laura was going to have a brother or sister. At night, after putting Laura to sleep, they lay together in the room that had been Arthur and Caroline's, but was now theirs, and talked about everything and nothing. About the day, about plans, about nonsense. And always, before sleeping, Arthur thanked silently for the sequence of unlikely events that had brought Beatrice to him, for the fainting that had revealed the pregnancy, for her courage to trust, for his decision to protect, for everything that had transformed an agreement into love. Beatrice sometimes asked if he didn't feel he had lost out by marrying a woman pregnant by another, by taking on a daughter who didn't have his blood. Arthur always answered the same thing. I didn't lose anything. I gained everything. I gained you. I gained Laura. I gained life again. The past doesn't matter. What matters is that we are here now together, and I will spend the rest of my days making you happy. And he did. Years later, with 4 children, a prosperous farm, and a story that became legend in town, Beatrice sometimes looked back on that March afternoon when she woke up on the kitchen floor and heard Arthur saying they were getting the doctor. That had been the day everything changed, the day she stopped running and started living, the day a lonely widower decided to open his heart again, the day an agreement became a family, and a family became love. Because in the end, they had proven something many people forget, that the truest families aren't the ones that start perfect, but the ones built with the daily choice to love, protect, and stay. And they had chosen that every single day, from the first to the last. When Beatrice discovered the second pregnancy, almost a year had passed since Laura's birth. It was October 1929, and the farm was at the peak of production. The fields had given a record harvest, the numbers in the accounts were the best in decades, and the house lived full of life, with Laura taking her first wobbly steps and filling everything with laughter. The news of the pregnancy came in a routine checkup with Dr. Henry. Beatrice had gone alone, because Arthur was supervising the construction of a new barn. When she returned home, late in the afternoon, he was on the porch playing with Laura, making the girl fly in the air and listening to her little shrieks of joy. Beatrice stopped for a moment just watching, heart tightening with so much love. That man had transformed her life in ways she didn't even know were possible. Arthur saw her and smiled, lowering Laura to the ground. The little one ran to her mother in clumsy steps, shouting, "Mama, Mama," with her tiny voice. Beatrice picked her up, kissed the chubby face, and then looked at her husband. "I have news," she said. He raised his eyebrows. "Good or bad?" "Good," she replied, smiling. "Very good. We are expecting again." Arthur stood still for 2 seconds processing, and then crossed the porch in 3 long strides and wrapped her in a tight hug. Laura squeezed between the two, laughing at the pressure. "Really?" he asked with a choked voice. Beatrice nodded against his chest. "Really? The doctor confirmed. Should be born in May or June." Arthur kissed her then, long and deep, not caring that Mary was probably watching from the kitchen window. When they separated, he had tears in his eyes. "I love you so much," he whispered. "So much it sometimes scares me." She wiped his tears with her thumb. "I love you too. And this time we'll live everything from the start, without fear, without hiding anything." The first months of pregnancy were calm. Beatrice felt better than the first time, less nausea, more energy. She continued administering the farm normally, doing the accounts, organizing the house, taking care of Laura. Arthur surrounded her with excessive care that she found funny but also adored. He didn't let her lift heavy things, insisted she rest every afternoon, brought wildflowers from the field just because. Laura grew fast, smart like her mother, stubborn like her father. At 1.5 years, she already spoke short sentences, recognized everyone on the farm, had a strong opinion on everything. The workers adored her, lined up to receive her smiles. Beatrice sometimes watched Arthur with the girl and felt profound gratitude for choosing him, or rather, for him choosing her, because Laura would never know she didn't have his blood. For her, Arthur was a father in every sense that mattered. It was in February 1930, when Beatrice was 5 months along, that the first problem appeared. Worrying news arrived from the capital. The New York Stock Exchange had crashed in October of the previous year, and the consequences were reaching everyone. Crop prices plummeted. Farmers were panicking, some going bankrupt, others burning crops because they couldn't sell. The economic crisis that had been whispered about was now screaming. Arthur gathered Beatrice in the study one night to review the accounts. The situation wasn't good. They had a huge stock of harvest that had been gathered expecting a good price, but now the price was so low that selling would mean a loss. If they held the stock hoping for recovery, they risked not having money to pay the workers and farm expenses. It was an impossible dilemma. Beatrice studied the numbers for hours, calculating and recalculating. Finally, she looked up. "We have 3 options," she said. "Sell everything now at a loss and guarantee at least some money. Hold everything and risk going bankrupt if the crisis lasts too long. Or sell half now to guarantee the basics and hold the other half betting on recovery." Arthur rubbed his face wearily. "Which do you think is best?" "The third," Beatrice answered without hesitation. "It's the most balanced. We won't get rich, but we won't go bust either. And if the price recovers, the half we held will make up for the loss now." Arthur trusted her instinct for business. "Then that's what we'll do," he agreed. "But we'll have to tighten our belts, cut expenses, maybe reduce staff." "We can't fire anyone," Beatrice said firmly. "These families depend on us." Arthur sighed. "I know. But if we don't have money to pay, there won't be a choice." Beatrice bit her lip, thinking, what if we cut our personal expenses first? Postpone the house renovation we planned, reduce unnecessary purchases, use the savings we have put aside. Arthur looked at her belly. "You are pregnant. You can't go without." She took his hand. "I won't go without. We have a house, food, health. The rest is luxury. I prefer tightening our belt than taking the livelihood from 10 families." That was the decision they made. They sold half the stock for the low price they could get, held the other half in the barns. They cancelled all non-essential spending. Beatrice started making bread at home instead of buying in town. Arthur mended fences himself instead of hiring out. They cut meat in meals to 3 times a week. They were small sacrifices for them, but made a difference in the accounts. The workers noticed and respected it. Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Beatrice were going through hardship together with them, not isolating themselves in comfort while others suffered. This generated deep loyalty. When the foreman Joseph came to offer to work without pay for a few months until the crisis passed, Arthur refused with a firm voice. "No one works for free here," he said. "All work has value and will be paid. We'll find a way." March came and brought more problems. Laura got sick, high fever that wouldn't go down, a cough that broke the heart. Dr. Henry came, examined, and diagnosed pneumonia. It was serious, especially for such a small child. She needed expensive medicines and constant care. Arthur didn't hesitate a second. He sold 2 breeding cows, a valuable part of the herd, to pay for the medicines and doctor's visits. It was 2 weeks of hell. Laura burning with fever, coughing until she vomited, crying in pain. Beatrice didn't leave her side for a minute, even 6 months pregnant, even exhausted. Arthur took turns, rocking his daughter in the early hours, singing softly to calm her. Mary prepared broths and teas. The whole house mobilized around that small child fighting the illness. There was one night, the worst of all, when the fever rose to dangerous levels and Laura became delirious. Dr. Henry told Arthur quietly that they should prepare for the worst. Arthur left the room and collapsed on the porch, head in hands, fighting panic. He couldn't lose Laura. He couldn't. She was his daughter, of the heart if not of the blood, and the pain, just imagining it, was unbearable. Beatrice came out after him. She was also pale, eyes swollen from crying. She sat beside him and took his hand. "She will get better," she said with a trembling but determined voice. "Our daughter is strong. She will beat this." Arthur pulled her into a desperate hug. "And if she doesn't, what if we lose her?" "We won't lose her," Beatrice repeated like a mantra. "We won't." They went back to the room and both stayed beside the crib, holding Laura's hot little hands, praying, begging, making promises to God. And then, when the sky began to lighten, the fever broke. Laura opened her little eyes, looked at them, and whispered, "Water," with a weak voice. Beatrice broke down in sobs of relief. Arthur ran to get water, hands shaking so much he almost dropped the glass. They gave water to Laura in small sips, and she drank and then slept, but this time it was a healing sleep, not a sick one. Dr. Henry returned in the morning and examined her. "The fever broke," he confirmed, smiling. "The worst has passed. Now just care and good food, and she recovers completely." Arthur squeezed the doctor's hand tightly. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you for saving my daughter." The doctor shook his head. "I just helped. What saved her was the love of you two. A child surrounded by so much love always fights harder." Laura recovered slowly. In a week she was sitting in bed asking for food. In 2 she was walking unsteadily again. In 3 she was running through the house as if nothing had happened. But the experience marked Arthur and Beatrice deeply. They had looked into the abyss of losing their daughter, and that had changed something inside them. Made them more patient, more grateful for each day, more aware that nothing was guaranteed. April brought better news. Crop prices rose a little, not much, but enough to breathe. They sold another quarter of the stock, enough to cover the next months with tranquility. The crisis continued, but they were managing to navigate it. Savings had been completely depleted, but they had no debts, and that was already a victory. It was in this month, too, that Beatrice had an important conversation with Arthur. They were in bed, him with his hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "Arthur," she began, "I wanted to talk about Laura." He looked at her. "What about her?" Beatrice hesitated. "When she grows up, do you think we should tell her? That she isn't your daughter biologically?" Arthur frowned. "Why would we tell?" Beatrice gestured. "I don't know, it's just sometimes I think she has the right to know the truth." Arthur sat up in bed, serious. "Beatrice, look at me." She looked. "I am Laura's father in every sense that matters," he said firmly. "I was there when she was born. I changed the first diapers, gave the first baths, heard the first words. I took care of her when she was sick. I will be there when she falls, when she cries, when she needs me. Blood doesn't make a father. Presence does. Love does. And I love that girl, as if she had come from me. And if one day someone tells her," Beatrice insisted, "if some relative of Richard appears saying he is the real father..." Arthur shook his head. "There is no real father and fake father. There is who raises and who abandons. Richard abandoned. I chose. And if someone tries to plant doubt in her head, I will be there to reaffirm that she is my daughter, of my heart, of my name, of my life. And no one takes that away." Beatrice hugged him, tears flowing. "You are the most incredible man I know," she whispered. "Thank you for loving our daughter like this. Thank you for loving me like this." Arthur kissed the top of her head. "No need to thank for love. Love isn't a favor. It's a choice we make every day, and I choose you two every single day." May arrived with heavy rains and a huge belly. Beatrice was 8.5 months along, and the doctor said the baby could arrive at any moment. This time, Arthur was even more nervous than the first, if that was possible. He had prepared everything months in advance: painted room, assembled crib, washed and stored clothes. Mary had detailed instructions on what to do when contractions started. Dr. Henry had promised to come running as soon as called. If you like these stories of true love and overcoming odds, leave your like and share with those who also enjoy them. And stay until the end, because this story will move you even more. It was on a Sunday morning, very early, that Beatrice woke Arthur with a hand on his shoulder. "It's time," she said calmly. Arthur jumped out of bed, already shouting for Mary. already pulling on boots, already running to get the horse. Beatrice laughed even with the contraction coming. "Calm down, love," she said. "It's still going to take a while." But he had already shot out to get the doctor. This time labor was faster, only 6 hours. When the baby's cry echoed, Arthur was in the living room with Laura on his lap, the girl confused about why Mommy was shouting upstairs. "It's your little brother or sister being born," he explained. "You won't be an only child anymore." Laura pouted. "Don't want brother," she declared with the brutal honesty of a small child. Arthur laughed. "You will, you'll see." Dr. Henry came down smiling. "It's a boy," he announced. "Big and strong, powerful lungs judging by the scream. Mother is great too." Arthur went up the stairs 2 at a time, Laura on his hip. He entered the room and found Beatrice reclining, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle that squealed loudly. "He's grumpy," she said, laughing. "Hasn't stopped crying since he came out." Arthur approached and looked at his son. He was red and wrinkled like every newborn, but he had his chin unmistakable. It was the first time he saw a son with his features, and the emotion was different but no greater than with Laura. Because Laura was the daughter of the heart, and this was the son of the blood, but the love was exactly the same size. "Hi, my son," he whispered. "Welcome to the family." "What will the name be?" Mary asked. Beatrice and Arthur had already decided. "Peter," they said together, "Peter Arthur Vance." Laura, still in her father's arms, stretched her neck to see the bundle that squeaked. "He's very ugly," she declared honestly. "Looks like a tomato." Everyone laughed, and Peter continued crying, and thus began the life of the second child. The following months were of chaotic adaptation. 2 small children, farm to manage, economic crisis still present. There were days when Beatrice and Arthur fell into bed at 9 at night, too exhausted even to talk. But there were also moments of pure joy. Laura learning to be a big sister, bringing toys to Peter even though he was too much of a baby to use them. Peter growing fast, fat and healthy, smiling at everyone. The house full of noise, crying, laughter, life. The crop crisis dragged on through all of 1930, but Beatrice's strategy had worked. They didn't get rich but didn't go broke either. They paid all workers, kept all families employed, and even had a little left over. When finally, in 1931, the price began to recover, they sold the remaining stock with a modest profit. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to catch their breath. With the financial situation stabilized, Arthur could finally do something he had been planning. On an August afternoon, he called Beatrice for a serious talk. She was worried by his expression. "What happened?" she asked. He took her hand. "Nothing bad. Just want to ask you a question." She waited. "When we married," Arthur said, "it was rushed, it was sudden, it was just civil. You never had a real ceremony, white dress, party, none of that." Beatrice shook her head. "I don't need any of that," she said. "What matters is that we are together." "I know you don't need it," Arthur agreed, "but I want to give it to you. I want to renew our vows, make a beautiful ceremony in the church, with you in a white dress, with a party after, with everyone in town seeing that you are my wife, and I am proud of that. Do you accept marrying me again?" Beatrice was speechless for a moment, and then started to cry and laugh at the same time. "Yes," she said, "yes, I accept. 1,000 times yes." Arthur pulled her for a long kiss, and then they started planning. The renewal of vows happened in October 1931, 3.5 years after the original wedding. Beatrice was 27, Arthur was 44, Laura was 2.5, Peter was 5 months. The whole town was invited, and the whole town attended. The church was packed, decorated with white flowers and ribbons. Beatrice entered in a simple but beautiful white dress she had sewn herself, hair loose falling in waves over her shoulders, a bouquet of roses in her hands. Arthur was at the altar in a dark suit, grey hair combed back, eyes shining when he saw her. Laura walked in front, throwing flower petals, very serious in her mission. Mary held Peter on her lap in the first row. Father Simon conducted the ceremony with an emotional voice. He spoke about second chances, about love that is built day by day, about families that are chosen and not just inherited. He asked for the vows. Arthur spoke first, holding Beatrice's hands. "Beatrice Vance," he said with a firm voice that echoed in the church, "I chose you once when you needed it, and today I choose you again because I need it. You brought me back to life, gave me a family, gave me purpose. I promise to love you, respect you and protect you all the days I have left. You are the best thing that happened to me, and I'm grateful every day for that fainting spell in the kitchen that changed everything." The church laughed softly, but many also wiped away tears. Beatrice took a deep breath, voice trembling but clear. "Arthur Vance," she said, "you saved me when I was lost. But more than that, you taught me I was worth saving. Gave me a home, a name, children, love. Gave me everything. I promise to love you with everything I have, today and always. You aren't just my husband. You are my best friend, my safe harbor, my home. Wherever you are, I will be too." The priest declared them husband and wife again, and they kissed while the church applauded. They left under a shower of rice, Laura shouting, "Daddy and Mummy got married again," Peter crying because everyone was making noise. At the farm, they had prepared a simple but happy party. Plentiful food, music played live by local fiddlers, dancing on the porch. Everyone ate, drank, danced, celebrated. At the end of the night, when the last guests left and the children finally slept, Arthur and Beatrice stayed alone on the porch. The moon was full, the fields stretched out dark and silent. He pulled her for a slow dance without music, just the two of them moving to the sound of the wind. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I thought possible," she replied. "Who knew, right? That lonely pregnant housekeeper would turn into all this." Arthur kissed her forehead. "I always knew," he lied shamelessly. "Since the first day," she laughed. "Liar, but I also always knew you were special. Just didn't know I would fall in love like this." They went inside together, locked the house, went up to the room. They lay embraced, and before sleeping, Arthur whispered, "Thank you for fainting in that kitchen." Beatrice gave a light slap on his chest. "Idiot," she murmured, but she was smiling. And then they slept, connected, complete. The following years brought more children. In 1933, Sophie was born, a calm girl with green eyes like her mother. In 1935, Michael was born, a restless boy who wouldn't stay still. The house lived in controlled chaos, children running everywhere, dog barking, chicken escaping the kitchen. Beatrice managed everything with impressive efficiency, the farm and the family, while Arthur took care of the fields and external business. They were a perfect partnership. Laura grew up smart and studious, the first in the family to go to school in town. She loved numbers like her mother, already helping with simple sums at 8 years old. Peter grew strong and curious, wanted to know how everything worked, took things apart to see inside. Sophie was the artist, drew and painted everything she saw. Michael was the adventurer, always getting into trouble, always coming back dirty and bruised but happy. The farm prospered. They diversified production beyond general crops, planted corn, beans, raised more cattle, built a small school on the property for the workers' children. Beatrice gave literacy classes in the afternoons, teaching children and some adults who had never learned. Hopewell Farm became a reference in the region, not just for production, but for the way they treated workers, with dignity and justice. There were challenges, of course, pests that attacked crops, droughts that lasted months. Workers who fell ill, but every problem was faced together, Arthur and Beatrice side by side, supported by the family they had built. It was in 1940, 12 years after the original wedding, that something happened Beatrice had always feared. Laura was 11, the age of asking questions. She was in the kitchen helping her mother make cookies when suddenly she blurted out, "Mum, why am I so different from my brothers and sister?" Beatrice felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean, honey?" Laura gestured. "I don't look like anyone. Peter looks like Dad. Sophie has your eyes. Michael has Dad's nose, but I don't look like anyone." Beatrice dried her hands on her apron, heart beating fast. "You look like me," she said. "You have my hair, my forehead." Laura shook her head. "It's not just that. I heard women in town commenting. They say you were already expecting when you married Dad. Is it true?" Beatrice sat down, pulling Laura close. "Yes," she admitted, voice low. "It's true." Laura widened her eyes. "So Daddy isn't my real dad?" Beatrice held the girl's face with both hands. "Laura, listen well to what I'm going to say. Your father is Arthur Vance. He was there when you were born. He took care of you when you got sick. He taught you to walk, to talk, to read. He loves you more than anything in this world. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does, and your father loves you completely." "But who is my blood father?" Laura asked, stubborn. Beatrice sighed. "A man who deceived me and disappeared when he found out about you. A man who never wanted to know you, never cared. You don't need him, Laura. You have a father, and he's the best father in the world." Laura stayed quiet, processing. "So can I keep calling him Dad?" Beatrice almost cried with relief. "Of course you can. You will always be his daughter, Laura. Always." That night, Beatrice told Arthur about the conversation. He got tense. "How did she react?" Beatrice smiled. "She asked if she could keep calling you Dad, as if there was doubt." Arthur relaxed. "I'll talk to her tomorrow," he decided. Need to make sure she understood. The next morning, Arthur took Laura to walk in the fields, just the two of them, her small hand in his big one. "Your mother told me about the conversation yesterday," he began. Laura looked down. "Sorry, Dad. Didn't want to cause trouble." He stopped and knelt to be at her height. "You didn't cause any trouble. You can ask questions whenever you want, but I want you to know one thing." He took her two small hands. "Laura, you are my daughter, not because blood says so, but because I chose and continue choosing every day. When you were born, I looked at you and knew I was going to love you forever. And when you got sick and I almost lost you, I learned that a father's love has nothing to do with who made the baby. It has to do with who stays, who cares, who loves, and I stayed. I cared, I loved, do you understand?" Laura nodded, eyes full of tears. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. Arthur pulled her into a tight hug. "I love you too, my daughter, more than anything, and nothing and no one will change that." They returned home holding hands, and the subject was never raised again. Laura had her answers and, more importantly, was sure of her father's love. The years continued passing. 1945, 1950, 1955. The children grew up and became adults. Laura married a teacher from town, a good man who loved her and respected her intellect. Peter took over the farm administration alongside his father, expanding into new areas. Sophie moved to New York to study art, returning on holidays with beautiful paintings and stories of the big city. Michael became an engineer, built bridges and roads across the state, but always came home on holidays. Arthur and Beatrice grew old together, white hair, wrinkles from smiling so much, hands always interlaced. They had 11 grandchildren by 1960, and the house lived full on weekends. Children running, laughter echoing, huge meals at the kitchen table that Mary, now 80 and retired but still living with them, supervised with a critical eye. It was on a Sunday afternoon in 1965, Arthur at 78 and Beatrice at 61, that they were on the porch watching the commotion. The grandchildren played in the yard, the children talked in the living room, the smell of cake came from the kitchen. Beatrice was in the rocking chair Caroline had used decades ago, Arthur sitting on the floor beside her, head resting on her knee. "Do you regret anything?" she asked suddenly. Arthur thought. "Not giving you more luxury, maybe," he replied. "We could have been richer if I had risked more." She shook her head. "I don't need luxury. I have everything I want. And you?" "I regret not forging that recommendation letter sooner," Beatrice said, laughing. "Could have met you earlier." Arthur laughed too. "True. Could have had more time together. But the time we had was perfect." She stroked his white hair. "It was. You gave me a good life, Arthur. Gave me love, family, purpose. Gave me everything." "You gave me more," he replied. "You brought me back from the dead. I was just existing before you. After Caroline died, I was sure I would never feel anything again. But you proved I was wrong, taught me that a heart can love more than once, and that the second love isn't smaller than the first, just different." Laura appeared at the door in that moment, now 36, 3 children of her own. "You two talking about love again?" she asked, amused. "We always talk about love," Beatrice replied. "It's our favorite subject." Laura sat on the steps. "Can I ask a question?" "You can," Arthur said. She hesitated. "Do you think I should tell my children about my history, about Richard?" Arthur and Beatrice exchanged glances. "Why would you tell?" Arthur asked. "I don't know," Laura said. "Transparency? Truth?" Arthur shook his head. "The truth is you are my daughter. The truth is I raised you, loved you, saw you grow. The rest is detail that doesn't matter. If you want to tell one day, it's your choice, but don't feel obligated. Your story starts with love, not abandonment. Focus on that." Laura smiled. "Thanks, Dad, for everything, for choosing me." Arthur stood up, went to her and kissed the top of her head. "No need to thank. You were the first blessing this house received, the first of many." Arthur's final years were peaceful. He passed full administration of the farm to Peter in 1968, finally retiring at 81. He spent days on the porch, reading, smoking his pipe, playing with the great-grandchildren starting to appear. Beatrice remained active, tending the garden, teaching at the little school, organizing everyone's life. Arthur died in 1972 at 85. Sleeping in bed beside Beatrice after a common and happy day, simply didn't wake up the next morning. Beatrice woke up, saw him there too quiet, and knew instantly. Touched his face, still warm, and whispered, "Thank you for everything, my love. Rest now." The funeral was immense. The whole town attended, and people from neighboring farms, and people who had been helped by him over the years. Laura gave the main eulogy, voice steady despite tears. "My father," she said, "was not a man of many words, but he was a man of action. He taught me that family is what we build, not what we inherit, that love is a daily choice. That character shows in how we treat those who need help. He lived those values every single day. And I, who was lucky enough to be chosen by him, will pass these values to my children and grandchildren, because my father's legacy isn't in the fields or the land. It is in the hearts of everyone he touched." Beatrice lived another 18 years after him, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She died in 1990 at 86, peaceful after a full and complete life. On her deathbed, with Laura holding one hand and Peter the other, her last words were, "He was waiting for me, I can see." And then she closed her eyes and went to meet Arthur. Today, decades later, Hopewell Farm still exists, managed by Arthur and Beatrice's great-grandchildren. The story of their marriage became a legend in the region. They tell the children, tell the grandchildren, each generation passing to the next. The story of the pregnant and alone housekeeper saved by the widowed farmer. But more than that, the story of how true love doesn't need a perfect beginning. It just needs two people willing to choose each other every day in all circumstances. On the wall of the main farmhouse living room, there is a large black and white photo of Arthur and Beatrice on the day of their vow renewal. Him smiling rare and genuine, her radiant in a white dress, Laura at their feet throwing petals. Under the photo, a plaque with a phrase Beatrice had engraved years later. Here lives love that was chosen, not inherited, and that is why it lasts forever. And it really lasted. Not just in memory, but in the values passed to descendants. The farm still treats workers with dignity, still has the little school that teaches for free, still opens doors to those in need. Because Arthur and Beatrice taught that true prosperity isn't measured in money, but in how many lives you touch positively. Sometimes on full moon nights, the elders of the town swear you can see two figures on the porch of the big house. A tall, white-haired man and a woman in a simple dress sitting side by side, looking at the fields. It's not a haunting, they explain. It is just love that was so strong in life it left a mark even after it. And whoever looks at that prosperous farm full of life knows that Arthur and Beatrice's story didn't end when they died. It continues alive in every descendant, in every choice of love instead of judgment, in every hand extended to those in need. Because in the end, that was the true lesson of that story, that the words, "From today on you are my wife," weren't just about legal marriage. They were about choosing to see value where others saw shame. About building family with love instead of blood. About proving that the strongest ties are those we choose to create, not those we inherit by accident of birth. And when Laura, already a grandmother, tells this story to her great-grandchildren, she always ends the same way. With a smile in her eyes and an emotional voice, she says, "My father taught me that it doesn't matter how the story starts, it matters how you choose to continue it. He chose love, and that's why we had decades of happiness. I hope you also choose love, always, because it's the only choice that's really worth it." And so the legacy continues, generation after generation, proving that Arthur Vance and Beatrice Miller did not live in vain. They lived, loved, built, and left behind something more valuable than any material inheritance. The certainty that true love, the one that chooses and remains, is the most powerful force that exists.